Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual event. My name is Courtney Octor. I am a business development manager at Integro. And today we are focusing on superior identity security, automate, govern, and monitor across all identity providers. And today, this discussion will be led by Bob Kalka, who is the global lead at IBM Security, and Jim Skidmore, who is the vice president of the solutions group at Integro. So if you have any questions throughout this presentation, feel free to pop it in the chat and we will get to your questions at the end. But I'm going to pass it over to Bob to kick things off.
Cool. Thanks, Courtney. And hey, everybody. It's great to see you. So I am a global lead for security at IBM. I have spent time growing and helping to lead our cybersecurity business since 1994. So I'm in year 31 of working on this stuff. And ironically, the first thing I worked on was Kerberos. So you could say I've been doing identity for 31 years as well. And I've been 36 years in IBM. I was a coder before that. So what Jim and I are going to take you through today is kind of like the reality check on what's happening with identity management, which identity security, right, has been the cool kids term for it. And one of the things that we're going to touch on today quite a bit is that there are some emerging categories in our world of identity security that are starting to really turn people's heads. And we're going to talk about some of them today. And in fact, I don't know if you've seen the 2025 Gartner Hype Cycle for identity, for digital identity, but they have a new category listed in there. And ironically, we're going to spend a lot of time on that today. They call it IVIP, which is Identity Visibility and Intelligence Platforms, IVIP. And so that shows you how hot this topic has become, because as we look at how do we handle identity management, we're running into some physics issues, and we're going to articulate those to you. And part of the physics issues are impossible to solve unless you have what a lot of people would call observability of both human and non-human identities across the board. So we're going to get into that here. Another thing you notice, it's very important what the end of the title of this deck is, which is across all identity providers. The term identity fabric, right, has been big for, let's call it 3 years now, roughly. And as with every new term in our industry, we in the vendor community see that you care about this cool term, and we say, oh, it just happens to be what I do. Isn't that very interesting, right? And so the term identity fabric has lost some of its luster just because everybody claims that, yeah, that's what I do. I'm going to tell you the difference between what we're doing here at IBM versus everyone else is that what we're going to show you today works whether you're using MyVerify IDP or Okta or Ping or ForgeRock or Entra or whatever. When we talk about identity security, we as IBM, we're very good at hybrid things and we're very good at AI. And so we have for years now been building our identity investments around being able to support hybrid environments, not only requiring our IDP. And you're going to see that as we go through this. So that's the two big themes today is we're going to talk about some of the emergent things like this IVIP stuff that's coming out, as well as how do you do that regardless of what identity provider you provide, because the problems that are out there are issues with every IDP that's out there. So let's dive into this a little bit. I think it's almost cliche to even have to bring this up, right? But the fact is there's a great saying that one of our partners coined a couple of years ago and has lost ownership of it because everybody uses it now. It's the concept that hackers don't break and they log in, right? They come in, they get compromised credentials and come in, and it takes us a long time to figure that out. So there was according to our X-Force Threat Intelligence Index, it's free, you can go to IBM.com, download it. We put it out every year of what are the trends in the last 12 months in threats and attacks. and it's 71% increase in cyber attacks that use compromised credentials. 60%, and this is a very conservative number. A lot of people are saying 80% of all attacks are identity based right now. We just picked one from IDSA. They said 60%. Whether it's 60 or 80%, the fact is that the majority of attacks today are taking place through identities. And we're going to show you in a minute exactly why. That's because it's actually very easy to explain that. And then finally, 84% of organizations had faced identity-related breaches. There's lots of other stats. I'm going to give you one more out of our cost of data breach study, which is another thing you can download from IBM.com. We hired Larry Ponemon on the Ponemon Institute every year to run a cost of data breach study. And the headline of that study is the average cost of a data breach by industry and stuff like that. And overall, the average cost of data breach is about $4.8 million. And everybody says, okay, that's a lot. That's not good, right? But what's more interesting, frankly, is that the Ponemon Institute also asks some very detailed questions behind those numbers. And one of the questions that they asked last year was, what was the root cause of the breach you had, and how long did it take you to identify and contain that attack? Not fully recover, just identify and contain the attack. And by far, the worst root cause for any kind of cyber attack, not just identity-based, was leveraging compromised credentials. And that was 292 days on average to identify and contain an attack based on leveraging a compromised credential. And it holds water if you think about the physics of it, is that if someone gets into a compromised credential and you don't notice that it's someone else using that because you don't have proper observability and analytics and IVIP kind of stuff, which few do today, then it's going to take you a while to eventually have some kind of tripwire down the road trigger that, wait a minute, what's going on? And then tying it back to that account. So 292 days on average to identify and contain an attack based on leveraging a valid compromised credential. So we know identity has become a big issue. So observability, or once again, what the industry apparently is going to start calling IVIP, identity visibility and intelligence platforms, is a big deal. So let me show you literally the physics behind why these identity attacks are the biggest thing. Point number one, just from the title of this slide, non-human and human identities, right? Anyone who's been in this space for any length of time knows that there are two worlds out there that care about identity. There is the IT and CISO side of things, which has been focused on human identities for 25, 30 years. And then you have the DevOps and platform engineering teams that have been dealing with non-human identities, such as secrets that applications share so they can connect together securely, right? That's been going on ever since the whole DevOps stuff and all the modern app development stuff has exploded. And in most shops that we walk in, between Jim and I, we've probably collectively flown, 15 million miles or something, literally.
Like that.
Right?
Yeah.
We've been in front of clients for decades, most days. And the typical shop you walk into these days looks at it, and you have, once again, IT and the CISO dealing with disconnect teams and tools for human identity management systems, including legacy stuff they wrote 25 years ago that's still around. And then the DevOps teams that are like, hey, leave us alone, people. We're here innovating and changing the business. And they're sitting there dealing with the secrets between the application objects, and now with agentic AI, that's yet another form of non-human identity. Of course, that's exploding. So what we're going to be talking about here is not one or the other, but both. What are the issues in both, and what are the issues in the interaction between the two of them, between non-human and human identities? And then fueled by an identity fabric. And when I say identity fabric, I mean regardless of IDP. Okay, so let's get into it. So when Jim and I walk into a shop for the first time and say, hey, what's your strategy for dealing with what's generally considered to be the two basic types of identities on the human side, which is external, internal, consumer, workforce, whatever you want to call it. And at least 90% of the time, when we ask the question, so what is your strategy for dealing with this? The answer comes back as a tool. We'll hear, well, we just decided to, standardize on Okta, Verify, Ping, whatever happens to be. And the obvious comeback to that is, okay, that's interesting, but that's a tool. It's not a strategy. And the response is often, well, we kind of looked at, we want to consolidate stuff. We got too many tools. Big surprise, right? And we did a 12-month bake-off, and we think this is the right technology for us. To which you then point out, well, but what are you doing about the IDPs you already have? And what about the IDP that, you invested in 25 years ago, homegrown, that you've been trying to get rid of for 20 years and yet is still around to some degree? And then how do you deal with the fact that you probably also have legacy apps that have side files with user IDs and passwords and stuff like that in them, and that nobody wants to touch because the developers probably aren't even around anymore? And what about the fact that you're also managing identities in one or more clouds? What you see here, the physics of this, is that what I like to call the original sin of human identity management, which is because there's disconnected teams and tools, it's literally been impossible to effectively manage this as much as we would like to. Now, that alone is a problem, and the problem that anyone on IT and CISO side of things says, yeah, we've been dealing with this for decades. But this ignores the fact that, depending on who you ask, for every human identity, there is between 8 and 60 non-human identities. I've seen predictions all over the place, and frankly, I think everybody's making it up. But there's a lot more non-human identities out there than there are human identities. And once again, that's the DevOps and platform engineering teams are dealing with that. And that's machine identities. It's secure API access and management. It's PKI, certs and cert rotation and stuff like that. And then the agentic AI. All of these are examples of this. Well, if the original sin on the human side is that we're using disconnected teams and tools and even ignoring, like with legacy apps often, and just letting them kind of just run on their own, the original sin here on the non-human side is what's happening is that the developers are just hard coding their secrets into their code. And of course, that's horribly insecure, because all you got to do is reverse engineer the code and you got the secret and you can pretend you're it and nobody knows any better. Right? So the original sin over here is, how do you go from hard coding secrets into actually managing the secrets and ultimately tying it into the rest of your IAM efforts? So you have these two original sins, disconnecting tools on the human side, and then the hard coding secrets on the non-human side. And by the way, behind that on the non-human side, there's another, let's say, extended original sin, which is not only are folks hard coding the secrets into their apps, but if they even start using a secrets manager, such as HashiCorp Vault, the industry leader, right, which we acquired earlier this year, you'll find that the DevOps team sometimes has dozens of instances of a secrets manager installed and managing them all in separate teams. So there's a problem behind the hard code secrets that even when you start moving to a secrets management engine, you get sprawl of the secrets engines, right? So you see why all these problems exist. And that's the root cause of why identities are being used for most of the attacks out there, because the literally landscape of where the problems are is everywhere. So what we've done with our HashiCorp colleagues here is we've been working on defining what are the use cases, what are the business-based use cases people are trying to do that they're unable to do because of all of this sloppiness, as you see on the screen here. And we've identified a couple of dozen, but we're going to share with you what are clearly the top ones that are coming up in every conversation that we're having. So there's 6 of these use cases that people say, I need to be able to do this, but I'm unable to do it. And we're going to show you how recent innovations actually address this stuff. So the first one is identity observability, right? I kind of started on this with you because this whole IVIP category of identity visibility intelligence platforms is focused in part. There's a couple things to focus on, but this is one of the biggest ones. Identity observability means can I tell where do I have posture problems? Where do I have security posture problems related to identities? What do those look like? Let's take non-human, human, and then the combination. The observability problems with non-human identities is, first of all, hard-coded secrets. Can you go out and discover everywhere you've got hard-coded secrets in your application objects, et cetera? And then secondly, can you tell when you've got multiple secrets, certificate, and key managers being used across the organization? Because obviously, if you have multiple instances of these things and they're not being coordinated in their management, you're going to have holes all over the place. So I will tell you, the typical shop we walk into right now, we'll go in and we'll find 15 copies of HashiCorp Vault Community Edition and 3 other key managers being used, all by individual teams, no coordination between them at all. So on the non-human side, it's finding the hard-coded secrets and the secrets management sprawl. On the human side, it's finding the shadow assets, the shadow identities, the shadow directories. That's become the biggest one. Everybody's got these directories for projects that started 3 years ago, that ended 2 years ago, and the directory was supposed to be taken down, right? And what happened is you still have 75 people using it every day to authenticate. And IT has no idea, has no control, no oversight or anything on it. So on the human side, you got the hard-coded secrets and the secrets management sprawl. On the human side, you've got all these shadow assets and shadow identities and shadow access taking place. That's what identity observability is all about. I hope you can see very obviously why this is so hot right now. The second one focuses more on the user experience and the security of the user experience. So the whole idea of frictionless authentication, things like FIDO2 passkeys and stuff, has exploded because it's a much better user experience and it's much more secure. So we're kind of client zero for this at IBM. We manage through our Verify identity management platform 30.5 million identities today from our CIO office, and 30 million external, about 500,000 internal. And we rolled out about a year ago passwordless passkeys to everyone. And now we just, life is so much easier. And it's going so well on the security and the reliability and the, let's call effort side of things, that our CIO's office recently announced that we are on path over the next year to remove passwords at all as even being an option to use. So talk about passwordless. It's not just frictionless authentication with FIDO2 passkeys. It becomes the standard of what we use for this stuff. So that one is always a winner, regardless of whether it's external or internal. The third of the 6 use cases is this idea of eliminating hard-coded secrets in the apps. And so that means going to some kind of auditable, right, compliance-driven, centralized secrets management engine, where when you have objects, agents, AI agents, whatever, that need to connect to each other, it's going to a secrets management to get a shared secret. Now, that's obviously where the industry is dominated today by HashiCorp Vault. You know, a big reason that we paid over $6 billion for HashiCorp earlier this year. It's the class act of the industry. And so we've learned a lot very quickly, right, about doing that with our new HashiCorp colleagues. And so that literally gives you an auditable way of doing this. The one issue that the HashiCorp team has shared with us is that the issue is that a lot of people, when they first start converting from hard coding secrets to using a secrets management engine, are only doing static secrets. So it's good that you're using an auditable secret out of a secrets management engine, but if you never change what that secret is, obviously that introduces potentially risk down the line. So the fourth use case, which is white hot right now, is dynamic secrets. Going to short-lived secrets, and short-lived, right, is based on the risk profile of the workloads and stuff. Sometimes, you know, changing it every few months is fine. Sometimes changing it every 12 minutes is good. So going to dynamic secrets, very few people have gotten there, but it's clearly where people are headed because it's a more secure way of doing this. And of course, HashiCorp Vault's been doing this for years. The fifth one, I even hate to bring this up with you, right? But privileged access management. It's been a big topic for 25 years, especially since Sarbanes-Oxley came out in 2003, and everybody said, "Oh, PAM, you got to do PAM. That's the biggest thing you should do about SOX." The problem with PAM is that everybody does it, but everybody outside of about 5 clients that I know does it partially. Some folks will have rolled out PAM, but it's only covering 20% of the privileged accounts. Some shops will be up to 80%, which of course is much healthier, but still you have gaps. And the cyber insurance industry has figured out that nobody is doing this very well, once again, with very few exceptions. And so we've seen it. I've talked to literally over 24 CISOs who told me that when their cyber insurance auditor came in to say renew the policy, they said, show me you know where all of your privileged users are and that you've got PAM controls, proper PAM controls against them, or at least mitigating controls, right, or compensating controls. And it's become a big topic because if you can't, we're either not going to renew your policy or the rate's going to go like this. And who in the right mind would want to be responsible for your organization losing their cyber insurance coverage, right? Because of sloppy deployment of a technology that's been around for 25 years and, of course, constantly innovating. So PAM has become returned on kind of the top list of topics. And then the final one is what the cool kids call ITDR, right? Identity Threat Detection and Response. This is the bookend with identity observability that fits into this IVIP thing that Gartner's come out with of identity visibility and intelligence platforms. And what that does is whereas observability finds the sloppy posture, like the hard-coded secrets, the secrets management sprawl, and the shadow assets, what identity threat management does is it actually looks for attacks, not only on the identity infrastructure itself, but things like policy bypass. And in fact, that's the number one thing we're seeing on the ITDR side of things is that everybody is running into policy bypass issues with MFA, with ZTNA, with VPN, and even PAM. And so I've talked to countless numbers of clients to say, yeah, no, this workload, someone in, say, this role getting access to this workload, they have to use MFA, and there's no way they can get around it. And we'll show them, well, by the way, this user authenticated, hopefully against a directory that you know, not a shadow directory, but if it is, we'll let you know that. And then they access the app, and you see the traffic on the app, and the MFA engine wasn't instigated. And they'll say, that's impossible. And then you go to show them the root cause, and they go, oh, I didn't realize if those 5 exceptions are present, it allows them to bypass it, right? So this side, which is essentially what everybody calls ITDR, which is a component of IVIP, is that. So what we in HashiCorp, what IBM and IBM HashiCorp do together between our Verify platform and the HashiCorp Vault platform and related tools like HashiCorp Boundary do with our partners like Jim and Courtney and Integro is that we address these use cases. We address lots more, but I'm going to focus on these because these are the ones that are getting most attention. The way we do this is first give you the ability to inspect in real time constantly, regardless of what IDP you're using out there. We allow you to find the secrets, and then we allow you to find the secrets sprawl, the secrets management engine sprawl, and all the shadow assets, right? And the industry generally calls that ISPM, Identity Security Posture Management. Then, of course, we have the protection. We have the secrets management through HashiCorp, both static and dynamic. We have PAM, of course, through our very close partnership with the Linia folks. We have ITDR through a very exciting technology we're about to show you, which clearly fits in and is noted in Gartner's publishing around this IVIP platform. And then behavioral analytics, which is huge. Because remember, I said the number one and worst attack vector to identify and contain is leveraging a compromised valid credential. How do you address that? Well, the way you address that and find things in the first couple of seconds as opposed to 292 days is through AI-based behavioral analytics. And in particular, what we've done is we've taken an acquisition we made about a dozen years ago, which is the world's leader in the banking sector for detecting real-time transactional fraud and financial transactions. All we've done is repurpose that for watching identity usage. So guess what? When you have a privileged account and you have an admin who's authenticated to it 174 times, we know a lot about that person who is the valid user of that account, such as what their typing rate is and their error rate in their typing. And so if someone compromises that account and they go to authenticate, we can tell in the first few seconds it's not them and flag it and block it, right? That's behavioral analysis. That's part of this too. You notice AI is behind almost every piece of this, right? And then governance, being able to do it consistently. So let's go into that a little bit and look at what that means. So first of all, being able to address the non-human identities through both static and dynamic secrets management, that is clearly what HashiCorp Vault does. HashiCorp Vault recently put out a new product that extends its capability called Vault Radar, which is a tool that finds all of the hard-coded secrets in your app and apps, and is able to find where those secrets are being shared, like in GitHub and stuff like that. So it gives you that visibility into the first layer of observability problem for non-human identities, which is where the secret's being hard-coded. Now, when you want to do frictionless, that, of course, is our IBM Verify platform. Now, I claim to you this is regardless of IDP. So what I just said is, yes, our Verify identity management platform gives you full frictionless access. We're even adding digital credentials and stuff like that to it. If we have a client that's using Octoping, ForgeRock, Intra, whatever, right? That capability to extend frictionless access to the vast majority of legacy apps out there is something that those other platforms don't have. A great example of that is WebSphere applications, right? We know a whole lot about WebSphere since we invented it, and there are tons of WebSphere apps out there still running. How do you extend those applications to support MFA and frictionless when those other IDPs don't support that? Well, we've taken that capability to literally extend Okta and all the others to support WebSphere apps with MFA and frictionless. And we call that, you see it in gray at the bottom of the box here, the Verify Application Gateway. So you don't need my IDP. If you're using those IDPs, you can use this technology to extend that to your legacy apps, including all the WebSphere and related applications, okay? Then for the secure access itself, including what I was just describing to you, the behavioral analysis of typing rates and stuff, that is all built into our Verify IDP. So if you're using IBM Verify, you've already got it. However, if you're using Okta or any of the others and you want that AI engine that does that behavioral analysis to find in the first few seconds when someone's leveraging a compromised valid credential, that is known as Verify Trust. Separate product, doesn't require IDP. It's just that AI capability, and it ties into any of our competitors that are out there. So you see, we're very serious about this regardless of IDP statement. That's because we're very good at hybrid stuff, and that's how we look at everything. So there's a case of doing that. Now for governance, obviously we have our governance tool, and then for PAM, or privileged access, sorry for the typo on this thing, that's Verified Privileged Identity, which is our OEM of Delinea, because obviously Palo just bought CyberArk, and it's well known in the industry, right, that let's say the easier to deploy and expand tool out there is Delinea. And so we sell that as Verified Privileged Identity. And then we also have for the developers in the DevOps world, where they're looking just from the developer side for secure remote access, we have HashiCorp Boundary, which just excels on that side of it, because of course HashiCorp and the DevOps world are joined at the hip. So that's all cool, but what we want to spend a lot of the rest of the time with you on, it ties into this Gartner IVIT concept, because this is arguably our biggest differentiation, other than, of course, HashiCorp, the prime mover in the non-human identity market. And that's something we call, ironically, Verify Identity Protection, or VIP. We didn't align with Gartner on that or anything. But that's the idea of how do you do observability, ISPM, and threat management, ITDR, for both human and non-human identities, including, of course, machine identities and all the other forms of non-human identities. And so that's what this represents, the ability to see the secrets management sprawl, the ability to find the shadow assets and directories, the ability to see the policy bypasses like MFA policy bypasses, stuff like that, right? That is what VIP or Verify Identity Protection does. It works with any IDP, whether you have my Verify IDP or Octoping, any of the others, it works with these guys and does this. So let's get into that. But before we go, let's start with the HashiCorp side of things. Because the simple fact of the matter is HashiCorp is the class act of the non-human identity market, literally managing trillions of secrets, 250 million downloads of Vault, and 70%, actually it's over 70% now of the top US banks, for example, rely on HashiCorp Vault. I can tell you I think it's fair to say it is a random sample because I'm with clients every day, is that most of the clients I meet with are using HashiCorp Vault because it is the class act of how do you handle these things. And how it works is very simple, right? Instead of hard coding the secrets, you get the ability to request access. Vault validates the client against a third-party IDP, whether it's IBM Verify or Okta or any of the others, right? So we got integration out of the box with IDPs. Vault grants the access. Client use policy-based access to get whatever they're looking for, secrets, keys, whatever secret type of secret they want to use there. And you can either do static or dynamic, right? And then we have full compliance through all the logging that it does. It's a very simple concept, but it literally changes how the DevOps teams work and adds governance into it. And I didn't say this earlier, but I will tell you something that's very, very noticeable is that a year ago, if I was talking about this, because I talked to tons, I know, hundreds of CISOs out there from doing this for 30 years. And when I asked the CISOs about this stuff a year ago, they're like, yeah, I probably ought to look into that. Now it's become a big topic because CISOs are realizing that this is an attack surface that they do not have sufficient insight into. And in fact, typically when I ask a CISO, well, what are you doing about collaborating with the DevOps team? They'll often smile and say, hey, can you close my office door? And they'll say, well, we have a call once a month. And I said, what do you do? What do you talk about? And what do you do? And he says, and he or she will smile and say, well, we talk about probably the same topics we talked about the previous month, about things we could do together aspirationally. But they smile because they're like, there's not a lot going on there. So CISOs have figured out that this is something they can't ignore anymore. They have to pay attention to the non-human side of identity management. And it's become very clear, right? So as I said, Vault does not only static, but also dynamic secrets. Short-lived, lease-based, on-demand, and it's years ahead of the industry sophistication of what's possible. And so that's something that, is clearly going to become one of the next big things here is moving to the dynamic secrets for all the reasons that you see here. And you see all the different kinds of secrets that you can use in all the integrations that are already out of the box. As our HashiCorp colleagues like to playfully say, everybody gets a new car, right? A secrets engine. So that's very, very powerful. And so the ability for Vault to literally find things, remember, as I said, we just extended this platform with Vault Radar, is that it literally finds the sensitive data and the Git supported version control, integrates with tons of tools, and it gives you that visibility of where are the hard-coded secrets, right, regardless of platform. So very powerful. Now, let's talk about VIP, that thing at the top of the chart that I showed you, which is our IVIP capability in IBM. And that's a combination of ISPM and ITDR, right? So if you look at it, there's really two types. There's the ISPM side of things, which is proactively discovering vulnerabilities. That's the ISPM stuff. Find the blind spots, find the shadow assets, find the secrets management sprawl. And let me be very clear here, because some folks go, wait a minute. Vault Radar gives you the ability to find the hard-coded secrets. What VIP, Verified Identity Protection, does is gives you the ability to see how many secrets managers do I have out there that are being used, as well as other key and cert managers. All right. All of this fits into the category of ISPM, of discovering stuff proactively. And then the detecting risky activities is the ITDR side of it, is the actual attacks, such as the policy bypasses and attacks on the IAM engines, right? So the way we do this is that IBM Ventures, we have a venture capital fund that has invested millions of dollars in this company, Offmind, that we OEM as Verified Identity Protection. And here's the secret. I mean, what this thing does, this chart really shows you why it's so easily profound what this thing does. Because it's an AI engine that's now been learning for about 4.5, 5 years, that pulls in 3 sources: your net flows, your cloud flows, and all the identity events from the variety of IDPs that you have. So it's pulling the net flows and cloud flows to show you what's actually happening. It shows you the identity events to sync them up with that. So when it sees someone authenticating over the wire with a directory that it's never seen before, it's going to say, hey, we found a shadow directory. And then when it sees activity against an application with no MFA, but it looks at the policy and says MFA was required there, it's going to flag it for you immediately, bring it right to your attention. Hey, you've got an MFA policy bypass. And it does this at scale. It'll show you, hey, you've actually had 332 MFA policy bypasses in the last 5 hours, and click here to see the details of how it happened. And then click here to see a graph that shows how did it happen in the first place. This is identity observability, both on the posture side as well as on the attack side. And it looks at it across both the human and non-human identities, all the IDPs that we know and love, and all the secrets management, cert managers, and key managers. That's how it does this. So this is an example of the dashboard. We're actually revising it right now, but it gives you an idea. It pops to the top what is the most pressing stuff that this is finding. And it's very interesting because the first time we go into a client and just set this up and let it run a few hours, there has not been a single case where they have not gone, oh my goodness. It shows you stuff, and it's material stuff. It's not, 25 false positives and we wasted time. It shows you what's actually happening on the wire that you are not excited about. So there's about 150 different things that it looks for, but here are the top use cases. These are the things that it's used for the most. First, on the blind spots, it's the shadow stuff. It's finding the shadow access, shadow assets, shadow users. It can find shadow password managers, for example, even stuff like that, and shadow SaaS usage. Then you have, on the identity infrastructure issues, you get into service accounts and credential hygiene and attacks on the identity systems. And then the risky identity activity category, which is very ITDR, is going to be the real-time policy bypasses. Right? So all that stuff does right out of the box. The magic behind it is that we're collecting in all that information, and then what we do is send it through. We first do graphical mapping of how everything fits together, and then we send it through the deep learning engine, and that's where it finds the strange behaviors and stuff like that. Now, I've given you a lot of examples, and I've hit them a couple of times, but here's another thing that it does. It not only detects problems on the human side with both posture and threats, and the non-human side for posture and threats, but it also looks at the interaction between the human and the non-human identities. So we're starting to see common cases that are popping up all over, such as you have a non-human identity, let's say a machine account on a service account. And what happens, can you detect that all of a sudden there's 27 human identities start constantly authenticating and using this machine identity after not ever using it before? And can you tell of those 27 human identities that are pounding on this machine identity, that 17 of them had been dormant for 18 months? That looks very suspicious, right? You ought to be able to flag that. But if you don't have the observability, you can't do that. So that's what this does. Part of the deep learning we have is how do human and non-human identities interact? And remember, prime form of this is agentic AI. And so how can you tell when there's interaction between human identities and AI agents that doesn't make sense? It does this. And so you see how powerful this is. And not surprised Gartner's come up with a new category to explain it. Now, a lot of folks say, yeah, but where do you collect stuff from? It's incredibly VIP, verified identity protection, is incredibly flexible. Like, for example, sometimes we'll have clients that say, you know what, we already take all our net flows and cloud flows, and we limit what we really feel like we need to pay attention to based on the risk of the assets and stuff, and feed that into our SIEM. So instead of pulling the net flows from your network, we can just pull them from your SIEM if you've already done some culling of the information that is based on your risk profile. So it's very flexible how it collects all this information, and then of course ties into all the IDPs. So one of the things that you realize is when you get to identity observability, with Change Healthcare being one of the more prominent breaches that everybody talks about, there were 4 segments during that breach that this kind of observability would have seen and flagged things that could have happened. So for example, when you had the original 0 day around Screen Connect exploited, what VIP would have been able to do is detect unexpected access to an exposed access. It would see that access and say, that doesn't fit, right? What we're used to seeing there. So that's part 1. Then when they got in and created a new cloud admin account, right, so they could expand their access to the thing, we could have detected the attempts, right, to enumerate the accounts, check the user access, and detected that attempt to brute force it. Then, when they started laterally moving by downloading the ransomware, we would have watched, for example, the RDP access to the key service for the first time and said, wait a minute, that's brand new. What is that thing? Do you recognize that? And then finally, once this thing got going and had the C2C communications going, we would have seen that traffic and flagged it. And any attempts to bypass your ZTNA or any other network controls, right? So this is just, obviously, it's just a philosophical treatment of it. But this is literally the types of things that you can see that every step during this attack, you could have noticed something was happening. So that's what VIP is all about. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Jim here in a minute. But what this comes down to is that when we're talking about securing human and non-human identities with an identity fabric, key stuff is working with an IDP, which, as I've shown you, is what we do. Being able to address the non-human identities, which of course HashiCorp Vault does for us, along with Boundary for secure remote access, and then VIP, which sits on top of Vault, Verify, Okta, and everything else, and sees all this stuff that I've just been showing you, right? So one of the things that we offer our clients is an identity security posture assessment, where we'll bring in the technology, spend a few hours with you, and show you stuff that you'll go, oh boy, yeah, I get this thing. All right, so this is all part of IBM's huge investment in cybersecurity, and you can ask any questions if you want about that. And one of the cool things is, one of the most common questions that I get is because HashiCorp was such a huge acquisition for us. I think the only one we've done that's larger is Red Hat. And because it's pretty well known that, the way IBM is organized with Red Hat was that Red Hat is basically left on its own for its most part and literally operates as a separate thing. HashiCorp we're treating differently because there's so much affinity, as I've shown you here, between human identity management with Verify and VIP and all of our competitors, that organizationally we're much, much closer together. So when we look at IBM security, we consider, HashiCorp Vault and Boundary, et cetera, and Console as part of that. So we've got a lot of insight, and Jim and the Integro team has a lot of pragmatic insight of how can you use HashiCorp to really roll out security lifecycle management across the developer and DevOps community, because that's often kind of Wild West in some shops. And so that's a very important thing. And so we have the ability to do that stuff. And so that's what I wanted to close with. So once again, when you look at the issues here, can you support the hybrid environments by managing both human and non-human identities and having that observability to find proactively the problems up front and then to address them as they actually morph into real-time threats. So one of our best partners around the globe, not only the US, is Jim and the Integro team. And so Jim, why don't you take it from here?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. A real mouthful, if I can say. Yeah, so really quick about Integro. Folks may know us. We're kind of renowned for our IAM prowess, working in the public and private sectors, kind of all over the US, Europe, the Middle East to a degree, India and other areas. Yeah, we can probably flip to the next one because I think that's kind of the valuable discussion here. Yeah. Do you want to flip to the next slide if you'd be so kind? Thank you. So as Bob was talking about, the way that we engage a lot of our clients, many of whom are IBM clients, but I would go so far as to also tell you we have obviously worked on other identity solutions in our lineage. We have never seen anything, and I say this with full confidence, like VIP and the ability to get that layer of identity visibility and observability across any IDP. There is, as far as I know, no other such tool that provides that capability. The TDR part to feed, some information, you may see some of that functionality somewhere, but you will never see the identity visibility part, that we're aware of. So these are some standard offerings that we get involved with. I think it's important to note the security posture assessment that Bob was alluding to. We were happy to get together and talk about, these are complementary, kind of where you're at today, where you hope to get to. And it's been a very interesting year or two for a lot of our clients out there and a lot of users of all types, right? We have the mother of all breaches that occurred with 26 billion individual credentials being exposed in the wild. Bob brought up Change Healthcare breach. Things are no longer happening in the thousands or millions. And these brute force attacks now are in the tens of millions or billions. We're still, dealing with clients that have phishing and brute force attack, statistics up nearly 40% since the mother of all breaches occurred. So gaining this level of visibility has never been more important. Understanding where the identity blind spots are has never been more important. And even legacy folks who might be managing, say, IBM Verify Governance for standard provisioning and deprovisioning, or using compliance functionality, using recertification or attestation, will find tremendous comfort in the fact that we now provision natively also to HashiVault. So we can manage, and I don't want to say literally handle PAM or privileged access identity or access management and standard identity in one fell swoop, but in certain use cases, from one place, you can manage those users accessing the secrets vaults too. And they're growing, as Bob said, so quickly. For a lot of folks, that's very valuable. I would also mention for Z-Series users, including large and some mid-size organizations, we now put Vault on the Z as well, because that dynamic secrets management has never become more important, and those are critical assets for every organization. So, the infrastructure readiness components are things that we do. The security posture assessment, as Bob mentioned, is a critical part of what we do and give you not only uncommon, but never seen before, I would bet you, visibility into the identity workflow, what's going on. And I won't go into every feature that Bob talked about before, but there certainly are plenty of them. Along the lines of this also, as we're doing attestation, as we're looking at identity automation and what users are currently in your authoritative source directory or your single source of truth. The net is that you have to be compliant with whether it's FERC, whether it's PCI, Gramm-Leach-Bliley, GDPR requirements, HIPAA, and healthcare. A lot of people have different ways of saying the same thing. We need to automate attestation to verify that all users are who they say they are. We need to know that there are no what we call orphans in your directories or your LDAPs. And these are, using tools like these, we're able to quickly tell you if there are issues around any of these issues. We also do a little bit of planning. There is no magic dust that tells you about zero trust maturity, sometimes other than looking at your topology, right? We see tools that can help you get to least common privilege through their algorithms, but the net is if you don't know where everything is and what all the attributes and roles look like around the world, around the country, or wherever, that's a challenge. We do know in this time of the mother of all breaches and 26 billion exposed credentials out there, that you're reducing your risk by really large numbers, right? The analysts say by 85%. If you get down to within 1 or 2 layers of least privilege for your user base, I would concur. That seems about right. So this is another area that we talk to people and help them to figure out kind of how to simplify complex network topology. And now, as Bob mentioned, with the cloud being the other frontier for governance for us all, we try to help you, figure out how to get to that simplest point where you're launching and governing your users in and out of cloud and hybrid assets. These are a couple of other areas that we work in. We do use an IBM paradigm, also called a business value assessment. If people think they're spending too much money on too many tools, it's really important that we sit and kind of go through those, because you don't want to pay for things twice. And if there's functionality and capabilities and tools that you're using, or something else can handle the job of 3, reducing your net overall cost, usually makes sense to a lot of people out there. I'm not seeing anybody this year in the public sector where we work or in the private sector in multiple verticals that's saying we're looking to raise our budget 30% next year. In fact, it's quite the opposite at times. So these are just some quick things that we provide assistance with. Excuse me. And really our goal is to help increase resiliency, reduce costs if possible, help the compliance aspects of your enterprise automate and really take advantage of the AI assets and a lot of the capabilities we all have in our infrastructures now. So that's really from the Integro side, some of the offers that we have for you all. We do work closely with IBM on the posture assessment. Again, just to reiterate what Bob said, the detect and respond, the ITDR part is where we automate that threat intel. We can send it back to your red team through automated workflow, which is usually valuable. Or we go to the ISPM, the IBM Security Policy Management side of it, for that incredible level of observability and solving all those issues. So those are, if anybody's interested, you can certainly get in touch. We're happy to send out the video to all attendees today. And, we're grateful for you to be here. So I guess I would kind of pass things back to Courtney and say, I don't know if there's any questions, or maybe we'll see them in chat, but, we're happy to address any of those.
Yeah, so I see a question. What's your vision for identity lifecycle management in the next 2 to 3 years?
That's a mouthful. Bob, you want to take a little stab at that from IBM side? I can tell you the tools we're using, what we're doing.
Yeah, well, so remember, when we're talking about identity lifecycle management, you have to include both human and non-human. So you're going to see, the governance tools, being expanded to handle both human and non-human identities. For example, there's an immense amount of attention to rotating secrets. According to policy, right? You put in a policy and say, okay, for anything to this class of application, we've got to do rotation. Well, that's a governance step, right? That's a life cycle management thing. And not surprisingly, if you think about it for more than 3 seconds, is one of the issues in non-human identities is the same problem we have in human identities, where they hang around forever, even when the person isn't around anymore. So how do you clean up, right? How do you get rid of secrets that are no longer being used? So governance tools, right, will be expanding to support all that. That's the biggest piece, is making sure that your governance addresses both kinds of identity.
Yeah, I would argue also that today our capabilities are such that when customers are usually automating provisioning and deprovisioning and are really identity standard solution built right, that problem can be minimized even just through good practice for kind of the current generation of tools, if you will. So if for example, somebody's accessing 3 applications through Active Directory, which is synchronizing with, for example, Verify Identity Governance, theoretically, we can clean that up real quick if that provisioning is being done correctly, and we automatically deprovision those folks, thereby, and then it gives us a quick secrets cleanup, on the back end. So, but yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Thanks, Bob. Yeah. Courtney, were there any others?
I think we have time for maybe just one more. How important is short-lived credential delivery for your privileged systems? I know we touched a little bit on this, but.
Yeah, I mean, so the problem right now with short-term credentials, let's call them, dynamic secrets, is that the sophistication of the typical shop is not at the level of granularity that there's an awareness that says, okay, I'm creating a privileged identity, I'm creating a privileged secret, whatever, and what is the risk profile around the usage of that secret? Because a lot of times you have no idea what's happening with that identity down the road. And so one of the cool things about VIP is the ability to watch an identity as it travels down the road of what's actually happening with it, right? So what we got to do first, before we can really answer that question in a great way, is we got to increase our sophistication of watching what an identity is doing. And that's what these observability platforms like VIP do. They give you that so you can watch what's happening and then decide what is the proper sort of rotation schedule.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. If you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And, Bob and Jim are happy to be that resource on this topic. So thank you so much. And we'll be sure to get you this recording. Have a great one, everyone.
Thanks.